We're back with more Monday Night Raw, ready for more action, and Bobby the Brain Heenan. What are you doing?
Watching a Japanese movie. Just want to see if anything else compares to Raw. That's what I want to see.
Nothing compares to Monday Night Raw. Let's go back up to the ring. Put that channel.
Turn down the volume, Heenan.
Hey, wait a minute. C-SPAN? Give me a break. Nothing's more boring than that. Hey, wait a minute. What? You
got a blowout.
Bobby Heenan, wait a minute.
Bobby, hold it. Don't touch that dial.
Hey, that's Johnny Polo, a friend of mine.
Get ready, get set, because here comes Adam Bomb.
My goodness! Adam Bomb making his debut here on Monday Night Raw. Well, you get a load of this guy. We saw him first this past weekend on WWF.
And then Paulie does the Paulie walk down the stairs, comes over to me and says, "Are you going to go to the ring?"
I did get my ass handed to me by Dusty.
I got fired because I got in a backstage verbal altercation with Diamond Dallas Page.
Just to be clear, I have nothing personal against Vince Russo.
Terry Funk took us to a karaoke place, and he said, after these people are Japanese mafia.
And there's Bruno in the opposite corner, and he's dancing. And I think, you son of a...
And I answered the phone, and it was Jim Cornette.
And nobody knows it. I think this is the first time I've said this, actually.
Hey, y'all. Grant Fletcher here. Thanks for checking out episode 50 of the 69-minute eargasm with our host, the quintessential stud muffin, Joel Gertner. Joel, Henri is come and gone, and yet here you stand. How are you?
I'm good. Henri was just the wind and the rain, man. We didn't really get pounded that badly by it. I think it was centered closer to Connecticut or so. So we kind of avoided it, or it avoided us, depending on how that relates to forces of nature and locations. And yeah, man, Henri, like you said, has come and gone, and good riddance to bad weather.
Here, I second that, man. Living down here in the Gulf South, I know that all too well. Glad to see you're doing okay. I'm sure all of our listeners are glad to see you're doing okay as well, because, well, I mean, without you, there would be no show, right?
Without your kind words, I don't know how I would live this mildly auspicious, semi-charmed kind of existence that I have found myself in. It's really the lifeblood, the soul, the engine and mechanism and logistics of what gets me by from week to week, from month to month, is your kind words and encouragement and admiration. So I want to thank you for that. You've not necessarily made me a better person, but you've proven yourself to be an exemplary judge of character in saying nice things about me. I'm not saying it's difficult for anybody. I mean, it's it's the default. You know what I mean? It's just like, when in doubt, like, when it comes to me and basically any aspect of it. It's like I say in my Twitter bio, I don't toy around as much with my Twitter bio as the Young Bucks do, but I, every once in a while, as the notion, as if I get a wild hair up my ass, I'll be like, hey, that's great. And lately, what's up there, what I put up recently is that I am the me of life. And I think that's really, all anybody needs to know.
So what you're saying is you live for the adoration of the fans. And if it weren't for them, you wouldn't be doing this podcast at all, because there would be nothing.
I live for the moment. I could slap a tomato.
Yeah. I'm glad you picked up on that.
Not just a hat rack, buddy. It's not just a hat rack.
I get it.
One or two less hairs every day, but not just a hat rack.
Yeah, I think you and I are in the same boat here. I probably need to get in on the Rogaine train myself. It's just, it just creeps up.
Who's
a
got
little bit
the
more
time or the
every
money?
year, a little bit more.
Let me ask you a question, honestly.
Yeah.
With the way our show has been monetizing up till 2021, Could like confess. You know what I mean? Like lie to me, but don't lie to yourself. Do you have the money for both load boost, a necessity, and Rogaine? Or is there a reason why you only have load boost in your life and the Rogaine so far has had to wait?
Well, if I had to pick between the two, if this is what you're asking, I would pick the load boost because the load boost is going to be the most fun out of the two. You don't need the Rogaine to have a good time. The load boost is going to give you a good time. The Rogaine is going to make you look good while you're having a good time. And Rogaine doesn't pay us. Load boost does. So I think I would go with load boost.
Load boost. I concur.
I'd have to get a second job to afford both. So I'm just going to go with load boost for right now.
Because of the cost of the Rogaine.
Right. Yeah. No, the load boost doesn't. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing when you're sponsored by Load Boost. Load Boost takes care of you. They take care of their podcasters, man, and they take care of you too. If you check out Load Boost, go to loadboost.com, enter the promo code EARGASM at checkout to get 10% off your order, and find out what a lot of our other Eargasm listeners have already found out about.
Yeah, I mean, I had to buy a special Swiffer just to wipe the ceiling. I mean, it's awful. It's and when you're on Amazon, it's like how exactly like in the search engine, like what do you put? Do you put Swiffer? Do you put is it more like Google where it's just like I just painted the ceiling, help me? So I don't know. I didn't know what to do, but I found something eventually.
Yeah, if this is your first episode, you're not familiar with what Load Boost is. You're hearing what we're talking about, and you're thinking to myself, "Wait, does that stuff make you?" Yes, it does. It indeed does. If you're picking up what we're putting down, it does. People have asked me, is it for real? It's for real. It's 100% for real. You got to follow the instructions, but it's for real.
Of course it's for real. It's helpful. It's a supplement. It's going to help you. It's going to get that job done. It does what it says on the tin. Is it for real? Is milk thistle for real? Is kava kava for real? Do things like St. John's wort help with what they say they help with? Of course it's for real.
Well, it's zinc and saw palmetto. To be clear, zinc and saw palmetto, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it teaches your dog how to fix the television set in the original Japanese from the original manual? Of course not. That's not what it's designed to do. If you go to the website, that's not what it's going to tell you it's for. It's load boost. It does what it says it's going to do.
It boosts.
If you're not going to listen to me on that topic, who would you listen to? This is like the Pope trying to talk to you about Christianity. I'm telling you about load boost.
So you're saying it boosts your load?
Find out. It'll boost your load. That's what it's there for.
Hey, man, boost your load with Load Boost.
It says it on the marquee. What are we arguing about?
I don't know. Yeah, are we arguing? Why are we even talking about it? Just do it. Just go do it. Just do it. Hey, you. You know what? I'm talking to you.
Press
just
pause
do it.
And do it. Grant, hold on. We'll wait. Press pause. In 3, 2, 1. Press pause. Pause. And welcome back. Thanks for buying Load Boost. Now you've got the anticipation of waiting by your mailbox for the Load Boost. And you can listen to the rest of this show while you do that. And God, man, our listeners live their best life, isn't it?
They're living their best life. They're looking good. They're feeling good. We don't put over our listeners enough. They deserve it. They listen to this show. They're very smart. We know that already. They've got good taste. We know that already.
No, they're all right. What? Oh, no.
Okay,
what, you mean,
I see.
Yeah, no, I mean, our listeners are, they're, I mean, I like our listeners. You know what I'd like? I'd like for each listener to tell 5 other listeners to listen to the program.
Yeah. I think each listener should pick out their favorite episode and tell 5 people about that specific episode. And then leave us a review. And then follow us both on Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah.
What's your let me ask you, do you have a favorite episode?
No, they're brain children. I can't. That's like, hey, what's your favorite Gertnerism? I can't. No, I don't. I wouldn't. If I did, I wouldn't tell you. And if I told you and you told somebody else, because I wouldn't want to offend any of the other guests, I'd have to deny it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I put in a good bit of work on this behind the scenes, as do you, and I feel like I'm proud of what we do here on the show. So it's really hard for me to pick an episode, but I have ones that I think that, a lot of people wouldn't expect, like, oh, you like that one a lot or more or whatever else. And just because, I don't know, there's just different things about each one that I really appreciate.
I'll stooge this off with zero worry and not a problem in the world. I will stooge this off. If Grant Fletcher had his way, we would have every single Dudley.
Yep.
Every single person who in any way, shape, form, or respect has been tied in to the Dudley family or clan. We would have every single Dudley, even if they only appeared once. We would have that woman that was like a sound woman who was like Spike's girlfriend. We would have every single person that ever wore tie-dye on an episode of the 9-year run of ECW Hardcore TV. We would have every single one on the show if you had your way. And there's one Dudley, I'm not going to say who they are, who's never going to be on the show.
Right. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Just an impossible guess.
See who it was. Yeah, for sure.
Whether I want them on the show or not, but whether I don't want them on the show or I do, they're never going to be on the show.
My dream episode
so you're
is
never
a Dudley
gonna get.
reunion.
So you're never going to.
Yeah.
So you're never going to get your. So the whole circle's not going to be complete.
No.
Right.
Yeah, my dream episode will never happen. It's a Dudley reunion where we have several Dudleys on at one time. Yeah.
And this isn't me trying to dissuade anybody from buying Load Boost by saying there are certain things that with Load Boost are not possible. But Grant, you can swallow a whole bottle of it tonight and put the empty bottle under your bed and go to sleep. And when you wake up tomorrow, it's still going to be reality that by the end of your life, we on this program will have not had every single Dudley on this show. That's just the way it is, Briz.
Wow, that's really bleak to put it that way. You know, we're talking about dream episodes, though. You were recently on I guess a Dreamy podcast, right?
Yes, a Dreamish podcast. I was on with the innovator of verbosity, the innovator of vocalization, Tommy Dreamer, the innovator of violence, chatted up your favorite cunning linguist and sexual intellectual. We did good, man. We went like 52 minutes or so, and it felt like 5 minutes, and it felt like forever all at once because we got a whole lot in there, and it was really, really, it was fun for me. He was smiling and laughing up a storm, so I'm hoping that wasn't just him faking it. I'm hoping I put a legitimate smile in his heart. And yeah, man, we had a blast, and that just dropped yesterday, I think. And it's up now. So after you're done listening to the 69-minute Eargasm with our special guest this week, this episode, you can go find the House of Hardcore podcast, the one hosted by Tommy Dreamer. It'll be in the same place where you find all great major podcasts, including this one and that one. And you can listen to me be a guest and Tommy Dreamer be a host.
That's awesome, man. I think you guys definitely should check that out. Maybe Tommy Dreamer could come over here, on this show. That would be fun. Tommy Dreamer is one of my all-time favorites.
Tommy, I got news for you.
Oh?
Never a Dudley.
Right.
Never even in any kind of alternate universe, took, a tie-dye shirt off of a Dudley in the middle of a match, put it on himself, picked up the mic. Hey, I'm Dreamer Dudley. Never happened. Not a Dudley. But will be on this show, ours, yours, and mine, that everyone's now listening to because my appearance on his show was contingent and conditional on there being a talent exchange where he would do my show while I do his show. So Tommy Dreamer will be on this show in the near heretofore weeks to come.
That's awesome, man. Something really to look forward to. Also something to look forward to. I'll be at the Louisiana Comic-Con over in Lafayette, Louisiana this weekend, doing some work at the main stage and hosting a live version of my game show. It's Trivial.
Wow, they put the convention for the whole state of Louisiana, the Comic-Con for the entire state.
Right.
They put it in Lafayette.
Well, here's the deal.
Is that so that people can not only drive and walk to the building, but they can swim there too?
Oh, yeah. You can definitely swim there. Preferable to get there on the back of an alligator, but you could swim there if you wanted to. It's in the Cajun Dome. You could probably grab a gator on the way. Yeah. Mick Foley was actually scheduled to appear there, but he had to drop out. These things happen with conventions. But stepping into his place is the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. So I'm really excited to see that. I'm really excited to sit in on his Q&A.
Please pass along my regards.
I certainly will. Hey, tell you what, if you have a question you want me to submit to him, I'll submit him a question in front of everybody.
I have asked him not to put him on blast, and every time I do anything like this, it winds up being a jinx, and we wind up not getting that person on the show. But to put his business out there, I spoke with him at StarCast, I believe in Vegas, a couple of years ago, and asked him if he would do the show. And he agreed and said he would. So if he's still interested, and if his schedule hasn't changed to where he wouldn't be able to do it, there is a chance, perhaps even in 2021, that we might have the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, on this show. I'll check into that during the month of September. And man, if we have him on our program, that is going to be one fine episode of podcastery.
That sounds great. Yeah, you know what's funny? I remember talking about that now. It's been a while. And like you said, like we talked about, things happen, schedules conflict, things fall through. But yeah, I do remember that now. That would be a lot of fun.
I can get lazy. I can get unmotivated when it comes to our precious podcast.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
I'm an all or nothing kind of guy, Grant Fletcher. You know what I mean? Like, my spirit animal is my cat, and my cat's spirit animal is Matt Martell from Everrise. You know what I mean? Like, I'm very intense. Like, I'm a Randy Savage for the new generation, and like, I'm a very all or nothing. You know, if it's not going to be $1 million project, I ain't got time for you. And so sometimes this podcast, I don't give it the love that I should, because in my mind, I see what it will be in the future. And sometimes I get frustrated that it's not there yet. So when you bring up things happen and things fall through and pandemics occur and this, that, and the other thing, at the end of the day, it's me that's got to get my shit together as well, my friend, because sometimes I can be not as motivated and quite more lazy than I need to be when it comes to contacting guests and recording more of these.
You know what? We're gonna do an Ask Joel sometime soon. We're going to have people just submit to you just whatever question they want to submit, and we're going to do an Ask Joel Anything episode.
Oh, no. It's going to be like the Hearts and Flowers segment on TNT with Captain Lou Albano. I'm going to
put you up to it. I'm going to make it happen.
Oh, no.
Be on the lookout. It's coming, folks.
My God, I've mercy on our listeners' ears.
Can I tell everybody, before we throw it to the guests, can I tell everybody a little bit about the call that we had last week off air? A little excerpt from it.
I mean, I until you get rolling, I'm not really sure.
Okay, look, we'll cut it out if you want to.
Yeah, but
it's nothing.
I mean, I'm an open book. I mean, the answer is going to be yes anyway. But yeah, sure.
So we're having a call about a related yet unrelated project, and we're talking. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about this show. We talked about life in general. We talked about this other.
As you and I normally do.
As we always do.
Are that crew that it's like, hey, you got time for a 5 or 10 minute call? And then it winds up being a 45 to 60 minute call.
That's 100% what happens with us, at least like once every other week. Well, so we're talking, and all of a sudden, Joel starts saying, I'm going to talk to Scotty and hit up Scotty and see what Scotty thinks about this. And maybe Scotty will record a bumper for this. And maybe Scotty this, and maybe Scotty that. And you're just going. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, am I supposed to know who the fuck Scotty is? And like, you just keep going on. And finally, I just cut in. Because I have a light bulb, and I go, wait a minute. Are you talking about Raven? And you were like, oh, yeah.
I met him in 95 in ECW. I called him.
You're like,
we didn't call him Raven in the back.
Yeah, he's just Scotty to me. I was like, I don't know Raven. I'm not on a first name basis with Raven. I don't know who Scotty is. That's what you got to watch out for with wrestling guys. They'll interchange shoot names and working names, and you just got to keep up.
That's funny, but hey, don't jinx us for him either, because he's also somebody who I've spoken with about doing the podcast, and I'd have to check and look back specifically exactly at us talking in my Twitter DMs, I think it would be. But I believe he also has somewhat gone on record with me and said he would be, at a time of his convenience, interested in recording a podcast episode with us. So that's Tommy. I mean, it's Jimmy Hart would be great, but then for ECW, there's Tommy, there's Raven, and then just like there was the talent exchange with Tommy, remember last month in July for her Patreon, I was a guest of Francine. And that was also predicated on a talent exchange, although I think it didn't even need to be, because I've already had a standing offer accepted from Francine, I think also going back to StarCast in Vegas a couple years ago. And our schedules have, I mean, it's been a real cluster. But I finally got to do her show, and she's also interested in doing our show. So maybe in September, to celebrate my 26-year anniversary with ECW, my 30 years in professional wrestling as talent and a performer, and my 46th birthday, maybe during that month, we can have an ECW month of all people that I've worked with, where we can have people like Tommy and Raven and Francine on the show in the weeks to come.
Well, Joel, you have gone on record and said it, so now it's going to have to happen, or else everybody's going to be very disappointed. And you know what? I think leading up to the 30th anniversary of your time in the business, that's when we do the Ask Joel. We do 30 questions for 30 years, right?
We do 30 questions for 30 years.
Uh-huh.
To appear on the show, actually in person with your voice, getting recorded with us in advance.
Oh,
to get your 30 seconds on the show, you contribute $30. And from the $30, 30%, or $9 of each $30 does not go towards our podcasting expenses and budget. $9 from every $30 goes to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. How's that for an idea?
So
in other words, if you are one of the, let's say, hypothetically, 30,000 people in the entire world listening to this show, and you do not try to make yourself a 1 in 1,000 case where you are one of 30 people selected to be one of the first 30 people to ever have their voice heard on this show, because you don't have $30 of disposable income and you don't want $9 of it to go to St. Jude so that we can give them a total donation from 30 people of $270, then shame on you. Remember earlier, Grant was saying, what do I think of our listeners? What I think of our listeners is that they should be beating down our email and social media DMs to get us $30 in the next 30 days so we can give 30% of it to St. Jude so they can get 30 seconds asking me one of 30 questions about my 30 years in the professional wrestling business or about my life.
So 30 people need to pay us $30 a piece so that we can send 270. Wait, what's that?
Yeah, the other $630, don't worry about it. That's our business.
Okay.
That it's not to say, oh, Grant's going to get 315 and Joel's going to get 315 and they're going to take their wives out to a big steakhouse dinner and they're going to each wind up getting more than St. Jude. And how does this make any sense? You're thinking about it too hard.
Yeah.
Most people, when they tithe, they're giving 10% of income to a charity.
Uh-huh.
We are taking your $30 and we are giving 30% of it to charity. and the rest of it is going to get put towards podcast expenses. Grant, we've got podcast expenses, don't we?
We do. We absolutely do. You know, I always wondered when you got your face burned by Balls Mahoney.
Wait a minute. This is a question. Are you going to throw $30 in the kitty?
I'm building up to it. I always wondered, and then you were giving those envelopes.
I'm not answering your cheaty little question here.
Well, no, it's not a question. It's more of amusing.
You think you get a free question because you're not one of the listeners and you're a producer?
It's not a question. I've come to a realization, right? So you had those envelopes of money you were giving to the Dudleys for them to take out targets seemingly at random. I always wondered where you got that money from, but now I've got a pretty good idea of what kind of operation that money might have come from.
Me charging people $30 to get a question answered?
Yeah.
So I can neither confirm nor deny.
So some of that money will go to St. Jude, and then the rest of that money you may or may not be seeing various wrestlers from different places be put on the shelf.
Exactly. I may be saving up for dude.
And there's no telling who it's for.
Dude, let me ask you a question. Remember when Tommy wrestled on his 50th birthday?
Yeah.
A few months ago? You remember how he celebrated his 50th birthday by wrestling on television, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if I want to do something similar? What if 4 years from now, in 2025, late summer, early fall, I decide to celebrate my 50th birthday by being on a major, regular, episodic, current professional wrestling television show? Hypothetically, let's just throw out there AEW, right? As an example, right? Okay. I would need in the next 4 years between age 46 and age 50 to put together a war chest so that I could show up as an AEW manager with envelopes full of money so that young, talented, aspiring professional wrestlers could do my bidding. Where do you think that money comes from? Do you think that happens by accident?
No, I had no idea. That was the thing. I had no idea, but now I have a pretty good idea where it came from.
Yeah, it comes from ideas just like the one you came up with 5 minutes ago, where we ask 30 listeners to each pay $30 to support. Grant, our Patreon is not active right now, right?
No.
Right. So our monetization is Load Boost and such as it is Grapplex, right?
Correct.
Right. So compared to, for example, running a lemonade stand, you could find more money under your couch, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So we're asking 30 people out of our entire listenership to be one of the first 30 to ever be heard on this show next month, in the month of September, for my landmark milestone celebratory month during the Ask Joel episode, to ask each one question, a total of 30 questions, and a total of 30 people at $30 each is $900, and 30% of that is $270, and that will be a donation made from me, from you, Grant, and from 30 listeners representing the listenership of the 69-minute Eargasm program, and that money will go to St. Jude, and I will screenshot it, and I will post it all over social media, and it will become the next 270 that I have donated this year. I did a donation in conjunction with New Jack. Oh, donate to Jimmy Rave too while you're at it. If you've got $100 that you don't need, well, then instead of just $30 for this, why don't you send us another $70 and we'll help Jimmy Rave from last week's episode get the best arm he could possibly have?
That's true. Jimmy Rave is having a bit of a time there getting a prosthetic arm. You know, he lost his arm last year, end of last year. Had to be amputated. He's got a GoFundMe up there, and then also on his Twitter at the Jimmy Rave, he's got a link to his PayPal account as well. All donations are appreciated there for Jimmy Rave.
And right now, I say, we're not running our Patreon actively, so everything is 101% free. So when you're listening to these episodes, if you like what you hear and you want to let us know, you can let us know you like it by showing us some love.
Hey, I don't know what else to say other than maybe it's time to introduce our guest.
Maybe it is time. I think this was one of our better intros ever, and this is going to be one of our more interesting guests ever. So this is going to be one of our most interesting shows ever. And wait till you hear. But to tell you about our guest, I'm going to toss it back to our producer, Grant Fletcher.
Well, our guest came up from Smoky Mountain Wrestling to WCW, WWE, and ultimately All Japan Pro Wrestling with over a decade in the ring and on your TV screen, and he makes up one half of one of the most recognizable tag teams from the latter part of WCW's history. Folks, be sure you're following us both on Twitter and Instagram. He is Joel Gertner, I'm Grant Fletcher, and this is Bryan Clark.
And well, we are back with more 69-minute Eargasm. Our guest this week is an outstanding professional wrestler who was all over the globe, barnstorming territory to territory, including WCW, including the World Wrestling Federation in the 90s. He is a former WCW Tag Team Champion. He is a former All Japan Pro Wrestling Tag Team Champion. He is one of the greatest. We are going to talk a lot of 90s wrestling with him and get some insight and also do a bit of a deep dive on his very, very interesting life and his remarkable career. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the one and only Bryan Clark. Bryan, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. I appreciate you having me on your show. Thank you.
Thank you, dude, for doing the show.
Sure.
With everybody, we start at the beginning because everybody winds up in the craziness of pro wrestling. And for many people, that's them living a dream. For some people, it's going from another kind of sport or entertainment and transitioning to pro wrestling, which they may not have been familiar with prior to being in it. For some people, their legacy. And even within those categories, everybody just has kind of their own unique, almost like a snowflake, like a fingerprint, a unique identity as far as, coming up into the business and growing up and their childhood, especially including maybe their first exposure to pro wrestling, be it as a fan or be it on TV, their first experiences with live pro wrestling. So I want to pose that question to you, Bryan, before you were of age and before you went to train and before you got involved actively as a performer in professional wrestling. I have a feeling that a lot of people, when they have the opportunity to speak with you, they may not go this far back and they may not inquire and ask, but what was growing up like as Bryan Clark? What was your childhood like? And tell us a little bit about your earliest exposures to pro wrestling.
Okay, sure. I'm from Florida, and I grew up there. And my first exposure to it, it seems like this, but it's so true. I don't know what the connection is. But my grandmother was a big wrestling fan. That was the thing back in the 70s was pro wrestling on television. And so she was a big fan, and I would get to go with her when they would come into our town, which is, I live up in the Panhandle area, about 20 minutes from the Gulf Coast, but they would come into town, and so I'd get to see them, see wrestling live. And I think that really, I was hooked from a young age because I got to see some huge name guys like Andre the Giant. I got to see Dusty Rhodes, Buddy Colt, Terry Funk, a lot of legends, man. So I have no doubt that left such a huge impression on me throughout my, even watching it, Florida Championship Wrestling, that whole era. But growing up, I was an athletic kid, played a lot of sports, but a lot of neighborhood sports, really not a lot of actual high school sports. I had a job at a very young age and just sort of worked all the way up, all through high school. Always had a job, but I always played sports and I worked out. That's the original of my first exposure was definitely with my grandmother and my family too. My family would go and they would sit in general seating, and my grandmother would be at ringside. So, yeah, she was a huge fan, and so I think that really left a big impression on me. You know, getting to see that action up close.
So from there, you know, you're doing, like you say, a lot of kind of neighborhood sports, a lot of kind of athletics, not for the sake of organized athletics, but just for the sake of athletics. You're keeping in good shape, and you're watching wrestling alongside your grandma. What's kind of the next step from there that you remember? I mean, what do you remember about your teenage years? What do you remember about making the decision to pursue wrestling, either as just, you know, an art form that you enjoy personally, or as something that you might be able to make a living at? And how old are you when all that's going on?
Well, you know, like I said, all through high school and stuff, I always had a job, so I worked up until I graduated high school, and immediately from high school, I joined the military. In my service for 3.5 years in the U.S. Air Force. And from there, and all through Air Force, I was on the U.S. Air Force powerlifting team, building myself up, working and training and stuff. And this was in the 80s. And so wrestling was real huge still. So when I got a chance to watch it, of course, I always did. And it was just always in the back of my mind. I had other ideas of things I wanted to do. I would finish my military commitment, and I walked on at Central Missouri State college football program and got a full scholarship. Again, like I said, I didn't even play high school football, but I earned a full ride and started as a freshman at Central Missouri. And I think that was just all due to my military training, and then also being on their powerlifting team and training hard, but still having that idea of wrestling is always in the back of my mind.
Jody Hamilton just passed away a few days ago, and I know, from what I understand, he was part of the team that trained you. Can you talk about kind of coming out of the military and getting ready to make your first strides within pro wrestling? Can you talk about just kind of wrestling school and the start of your career? Is your grandmother at this point, is she alive? Does she know that this is something that you want to pursue? Does she get to see you as a pro wrestler? Talk about maybe your early days, because you know, up here, you know, I'm from Brooklyn, but I've been kind of following the industry through the sheets, and I got in '91, and you were on my radar for sure in Smoky Mountain, and even going back to the first WCW run in the very early '90s. But I had actually forgotten that in the dwindling days of the AWA around '89, '90, that you actually got a bit of a start up there while that was kind of getting ready to go into dormancy. But can you talk about the late '80s and kind of being out of the military and you embarking upon pro wrestling?
Yes. Well, like I said, after the military, I walked on at Central Missouri State and was playing college football. But in the off season, I had actually, I don't know, maybe my second junior or sophomore year, maybe that area. I met Ox Baker, who lived in a town not too far from where I was going to school. So I said, okay, I got to meet this guy. You know, he's legendary. Not for really being a worker, but for his promos and his look. It was just one of a kind. You know, he was in Escape from New York with Kurt Russell, the big movie back in the day. And so I met him, and he sort of got my feet wet, but really doing nothing. I needed training, and Ox could not train me. And I needed a place to go. I went to AWA with a couple of little things with him, but not a whole lot of anything. Had maybe one or two matches, if you want to call them that. Green as grass. And so I knew that, like I said, I would be playing college football and come home and turn on ESPN and watch one or two little things that I did, but nothing of significance. So that's when after I graduated, I said, okay, I'd already talked to Jody a few times, and he said, yeah, you come on down and I'll train you. And it was just basically on a handshake, not a pay a fee or anything like that. He was just, I think because he was friends with Ox, and so he basically welcomed me into, you know, the old carpet warehouse down in South Atlanta. That's where I moved to and got trained by Jody and Dwayne Bruce.
What are some of the things that you learned there? Some of the things that maybe you didn't know already from Ox that you didn't know during your AWA time? What are some of the first things that you learned that you may not have known just from watching?
Oh, really, just about everything, honestly, from A to Z. I mean, Jody was just so intelligent in his promos and just everything about talking in front of a live crowd or ring psychology or just everything, man. Just from the very beginning, I really, I took a lot of bumps down there and paid my dues. I worked outlaw shows throughout the area. Any chance I could get, I would be in the ring. I still had a job and stuff, but every chance I would get, I had a guy I was working for was really somewhat of a fan, and so he really was lenient as far as letting me go to these shows and work. But yeah, and I got lucky for the fact that I got to actually work on one of these independence shows, and I worked with Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff, who was a dear friend of mine, and we just recently lost him also. But he is the one who put me over, because like I said, I was training the whole time at the power plant, but it wasn't even called a power plant. But I was training that whole time, and then I worked with Paul on the independent, and Paul was working in Smoky Mountain. And so he put me over to Cornette, and they brought me up, and Jim really liked me, and so he put me having Kevin Sullivan as my manager, and so that sort of got me up and running.
I was surprised in looking at your Wikipedia page to kind of go over everything and kind of refresh myself on your career. I was surprised by chronologically how relatively short your time in Smoky Mountain was, because you really did. Me watching Smoky Mountain and studying it at that time, you made a big presence, and it's just really looking back, it's surprising that you were there for as short a time as you were. Why was that, and where did your career go from there?
It was a short period of time. I wanted to stay longer, and if I look back on it, I think I probably would have, but I got the call from WWF, which was Sergeant Slaughter called and wanted to see me. And so they had me up for 2 dark matches up in the Carolinas, and I tried out the first night, and they hired me the first night. I worked both nights, but they hired me after the first night. So that's why it was such a short stay in Smoky. I love working Smoky. I look back on it. It was some of my best memories of just wrestling without pressure, having even though it was a smaller show, smaller arena, sometimes they still would get 2,000 people sometimes. Some arenas, some were 1,500, some were smaller, but it was just no pressure, and it was fun. And the locker room was great. So that was a great experience. But that was the reason I left early, was because I got the call.
And before we go into the WWF run, let's dial it back a bit, because I definitely don't want to gloss over your WCW time. WCW in the early 90s, the first time around. I'm guessing, being in Georgia and training with Cody Hamilton and Dwayne Bruce was instrumental in you getting a look and doing some work there. Tell us about your experiences in the early 90s in WCW and what the company was like and what it was like for you to do TV for the first time.
Well, the couple of times that I did do the TVs, I wasn't planning on it. They always tell you to show up, with your gear no matter what. And I think Jody and Dwayne were doing us a favor by having us show up and stuff. And a couple of times I got threw in on some matches where I just found out about it that same day. That it was a little unorganized, I thought. But, I was so green and really didn't know. And I'm like, I filled in for Scott Hall one time, and then I had a tag match one time, and they happened to be pay-per-views. I'm just like, geez, man, this is, I need to be trained. I don't need to be on TV, But you don't know what to say. You're just in that situation, But yeah, the early stuff, I really I felt like I had a lot to prove. I felt like I sort of fell on my face, honestly. That's the way I felt. But I didn't ask to be on those shows. They just put me on them, and so that's sort of how that happened. But, I knew that I still had so much more to learn, and that was a blessing to get to go to Smoky Mountain and be under Cornette's guidance.
Now, I lied. I had said that we would talk about early WCW and then we'd get right to the WWF coming off of Smoky. I lied. I forgot momentarily about 1992. You working with Herb Abrams' UWF, the Universal Wrestling Federation, Herb Abrams, for some of his South Carolina stuff, which is kind of his middle to later stuff. Not sure how long you were there or how many shots you did, but what was it like working with him, for him, and in '92 in South Carolina, what was the Herb Abrams UWF vibe like?
I think the crowd was pretty decent. I remember good reactions and stuff. I only did a couple of TV tapings with them. It just seemed like that's really what just their focus was, more TV taping. I don't ever recall doing a house show. I just remember a couple of TV tapings. And it seemed okay to me. I didn't see, I was still, like I said, learning and working my way through. But I don't really remember any negative aspects to it, at the time.
Very cool. So coming out of Smoky Mountain, we're getting back now into the mid-'90s. Sergeant Slaughter had called you up for a look, and you do 2 dark matches at tapings, and you get hired. And I think by May of that year, was it May of '94? '93. By May of '93, you're starting out in the WWF. You did a couple of years there. What were is your grandmother still with us? Does she see you as a WWF star? Does she know you're wrestling? What's going on with that? And then also
yes.
just personal,
yep.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Sure.
And then personal
yep.
life, like just what's going on in your life? How are you? I mean, you're young, you're excited. What are they telling you? What are they promising you anything? Just kind of like what's the vibe, personal and professional, as you embark on the WWF portion of your career?
Well, I was excited, of course. I'm thinking to myself, okay, man, this is the biggest company in the world. They've given me a gimmick, something I could work with. And I was excited about it. But that excitement did not really last that long because, I went from working in the Southeast to all of a sudden working around the world. And we were doing 280 to 290 days per year. That including adding on personal appearances and signings and whatever else they could come up with. And the schedule was just brutal. I mean, and then they also, that was around the time that Vince was going through his big steroid trial. So they drug tested for every single thing under the sun, which is, I never failed a test, so I wasn't worried about it. But the point being is that they ran us so hard and just wore us down to basically nothing. And, I would get home off the road and my wife would say, okay, your check's in the mail. And it got to the point where I didn't even want to know about the checks because I couldn't believe as hard as I was working and having an action figure out and just all the stuff that was going on, that the pay was so bad. And some people were just like, they're shocked to hear that, but it was the truth because I didn't understand it. It never added up as far as the amount of work that was going into it versus you come home to your wife and, with your family and everything to bad payoffs. And it just, I took it and went with it for the exposure and stayed with it and rode it as long as I could. Honestly, that's sort of how that happened.
You were there for a couple of years, no? From 93 until maybe about 95?
That's about right, yeah.
What was the end of it like? What was kind of the cause and effect, or what was the result in how did you kind of wrap up with them?
Well, honestly, I just a lot of guys a few guys have done this and they just have had enough. And I was one of those people that, man, I just had enough. I was like, I lived in Atlanta. I had already had an in with Bischoff. I knew I had a job there. And so I only had about 4 or 5 months left remaining on my contract. And I'd been promised a few things. One was the IC title, which has really nothing to do with the title itself, but it just had to do with the pay. I mean, I was smart enough to know that IC title spot is higher up near the cards, which meant a lot more money and bigger paydays. And that didn't happen. And, I just, I had a few of his people point blank tell me, some of his top guys tell me that's what they're planning. And it just didn't happen. And then I lost another big deal. It was almost like Randy's Slim Jim deal. And I went and met with the board of directors on this company. It was like an older school, but like an energy drink company. And so, I mean, I went in there. They had the big cutout board and me pushing the product and everything. And the last minute, Vince goes, "Well, no, this is not good enough for me. I'm snatching it." And I'm just like, "You're killing me here, man. I'm not making any money, and then you take this away from me." And so, just one thing kept, it kept adding up. And then finally, I just snapped and said, "That's it. I'm going home. I'm not flying to Boston to do the show." I went home. I was so pissed. I had enough.
Wow. Did you transition right into WCW? I mean, was there any kind of 90-day non-compete, or did you want to take a moment off?
Yeah, he had a 6-month starve you out clause, which is ridiculous. If you think about it now, how someone could get away with that. Like if someone said, "Hey, Joel, you can't do this radio show anymore. You go starve for 6 months." That's such BS. But I worked around it. I went to Europe. I worked for a company called Hammerlock over in the UK. So I was doing trips back and forth to fill that 6-month period. And as soon as that was over, I had a meeting with Bischoff, signed a 3-year deal, and was finally making the money that I really felt I deserved. I mean, I just felt like the WWF time was just financially was, exposure-wise, great. Money-wise, it wasn't.
Now, it was a tale of two cities, I think. I mean, I don't want to put, that's kind of me as an outsider wondering, but it would seem like comparing 93 to 95 WWF with late 90s WCW was kind of a tale of two cities. Did it feel like that to you? Could you sense that even though it was a move, maybe 9 times out of 10, all else being equal, sometimes a move from WWF to WCW, a lot of people in their experience might have seen that as a step sideways or a step down. In your judgment, can you attest that as it worked out for you, that this move from the WWF to WCW was bigger and better for business, and was there also better morale in the WCW locker room, or was it more tense and was everything kind of more on eggshells? Now everybody's story is going to be different. Everybody has a different interaction policies with the heads of the companies. But like with me, I had a very good relationship with Eric. If I had an issue or a question about the direction of my character, what I was doing, or if I had some concerns, I could talk to him. When we had contract negotiations, they were negotiations. They weren't like, "Hey, Brian, go on the road for 300 days. I'll send you something in the mail." Or either got to go through 10 people just to talk to Vince. That kind of thing. It was like night and day for me. So it was great. I loved it. I enjoyed working for Eric. I enjoyed working for TBS. That was, to me, that's where I always wanted to be anyway. That was my first choice. I was never like the old WWF. At times I thought so, back in the late 80s when they were booming, in the early 90s. But then when I got there, it was just a shell of what it used to be. And so working for Turner was definitely, I loved it. There's no doubt. And of course the money was great, and the schedule was much better. And those reasons, things that happened, man, I had 2 surgeries while I was working for Vince. He never paid a dime. He never offered to help. Nothing. Just like, "Well, take care of yourself." I had to beg for 6 months off to get 6 weeks off to get my shoulder scoped. I was back within maybe 4 weeks, and in the ring by the 6th week. I was supposed to be off for 10. Just little things like that. Those things kind of add up. And if you compare the
the two companies, I would definitely take WCW.
Now, on a high concept level, on a kind of 2 words or less level, I know that the answer to my question is Mortal Kombat. But asking you, somebody who's been through it and lived it and had more details about what the nitty-gritty was supposed to be, Blood Runs Cold. If that would have gotten to where it was destined in the minds of its creators to get to, and if it would have fired on all cylinders, based on your understanding, what was Blood Runs Cold supposed to be?
I think it was basically a live version of Mortal Kombat, really, told in a wrestling story. And so that's really what it was supposed to be. And but what it happened is that was just getting off the ground. I mean, because I think I spent 4, 5, 6 months in a dojo in Atlanta, taking karate, kickboxing, judo. I did all that stuff, preparing. I didn't just sit at home and say, okay, I'm going to go. I did everything. I was like at a training center to shoot dojo. And so I did all that stuff. And it just happened to be that by the time we debuted, NWO was rolling in. And so it just sort of got drowned out by all of that, which, I mean, that really drowned out everything in both companies, really, if you think about it. So that's sort of what happened. But, I mean, I was on the Mortal Kombat TV series, and, I got a lot of stuff out of it. So, no complaints with it.
Excellent. And this is this can be a weird question to ask. It can be kind of a shitty question, and it's not, I'm just, I'm trying to ask it within the framework of, we've already kind of contextually established that it was kind of better times for WCW when you were there than it was for the WWF when you were there. But just to confirm, because I talked with Kamala a year or two before he passed a few years ago, and he swore that some of the payoffs that he got from Bill Watts were better than anything he ever saw at the WWF, including the Garden in the main event against Hulk Hogan. So I guess my question to you is, working Blood Runs Cold within late 90s WCW, was that better pay than working as Adam Bomb and being, so to speak, lined up for an IC title run in the early to mid 90s?
WCW money, absolutely. I signed a 3-year guaranteed deal that was 4 or 5 times what Vince was paying me easily. Oh, wow. So Kamala is 100% right. And then I had negotiation powers. I had first-class seating, which was great after being shoved in the tuna can and coach. And what I mean by that is I'm 6'6", 290, trying to fit in a coach seat, flying cross-country or a red-eye to go and then, pay for your own rent-a-car, pay for everything. And just, it's like night and day, man. A company that would take care of you and another company that would chew you up and spit you out. That's just sort of the way that's just the way it was.
Tell us about kind of the middle of the run. Tell us about maybe 98. I think you're injured. And then I think during that time, maybe, I don't know if it's because Blood Runs Cold runs its course, but I think when you come back from the injury, come back with a gimmick shift and you come back, I think, as a face. Can you talk about from the injury on, can you talk about 98 maybe heading into 99?
Yeah, that was a really good time, actually. What happened was, Blood Runs Cold just sort of dissolved. And I told Eric, I said, we had a meeting, and I said, Eric, I'd taken some new photos into him and stuff. And what I sort of did was I combined a little bit of Wrath with a little bit of Adam Bomb, the same, without coming out in the singlet and the same look, but as Wrath. And I combined that, and I come up with a new finisher called the Meltdown. And I showed it to Eric and stuff, and he's like, okay, let's give it a shot. And it got over. I mean, I went on like a 7 or 8 month undefeated streak. And so I did it. I basically said, you know what, let me do this my way. If you don't mind, let me do it my way. If it does not work, then I'll do whatever you need me to do. But I've always believed in myself and my ability, and I knew I could fly for my size. I could off the top rope, you name it, I could do it. And I just knew that it would get over, and it did. And every night, man, I go up, when I hooked that into that meltdown, that pump out to slam over my shoulder, man, I just get a pop every night. It just kept building. So that was a really good time for that character, and working in that territory. Yeah.
In the later part of '98, like around Thanksgiving, the same way when you were with Vince, there were rumblings for the IC title. There start to be rumblings that maybe somebody like you is somebody who needs to stand across the ring from Goldberg. In around Thanksgiving of '98, they put you in there, though, with Kevin Nash. Can you talk about the whole kind of how things are looking when you're there and Nash is there and Goldberg is there, right? So there's a lot of big guys, which, categorically the NWA wasn't. It was kind of a resurgence, but it was kind of big guys that could work, big guys that were super charismatic. It was kind of really, really marketable big guys that looked like they could sell a ton of action figures. And again, that includes Goldberg and includes Nash. But the run that you start going on, the tear with the new gimmick, kind of pre-KroniK, kind of like you say, melding in some Adam Bomb and melding in some Wrath. So people are starting to talk that maybe you should be in there with Goldberg, and you wind up in there with Nash. Can you walk us through that kind of little time period?
Yeah, I think like I said, I didn't know how long this undefeated streak was going to run. I had no idea. Eric was just like, let's give it a shot, and of course it kept building and building, and so he was going with it. And I was too, of course. I was happy with it. But I think it got around time for they were going to beat Bill, I think, in December or January. Might have been either way. A month or so before Nash was going to beat Bill, someone came up with the idea. I don't know who. Doesn't really matter. But so they had me in with Nash on a Nitro, and he beat me in a match, and so that ended my undefeated streak. I think they could have, of course, we actually had a good match for two big guys. I mean, we did a lot of stuff, and I felt like I got a good match out of it. I got a lot of my stuff in. I think we could have got a lot. We could have done a whole angle actually, but it just didn't happen that way. And so then he went on to beat Bill for the title. So I think that was their thinking. Someone's thinking, saying, okay, he's got to beat somebody else that's really credible right now. Who is it? And I happen to be that person. That's sort of how that worked out.
They did keep you strong into '99. You do have a program with Bam Bam Bigelow. And then can you kind of talk about, I think you had an ACL injury, I think in a match against Jerry Flynn. Can you talk about kind of '99 and that injury?
Yes. You always remember most of your injuries. I remember when Road Warrior came with a steel chair in Baltimore and put 30 staples in my head. I can remember that night in the Baltimore hospital. I can remember you remember those are traumatic events. What people want to, I know this is all fake, but you get your ACL torn to bits. I think I did a show in Seattle. I think I flew a red eye into Orlando. I trained legs that day. Had my going out for my regular squash match, and I came off the top rope, which I'd done hundreds and hundreds of times before. And for some reason, I don't know if I was just tired or what, but my right leg, my left leg was just dragging just a little bit in midair. And when I came down, man, I just landed just a little bit off, and it just popped it. And so we just sort of fought. I kept fighting through the match and threw Jerry outside, and I just told the ref to kind of tell him, say, hey, man, you DQ this match. I'm done. I just blew my knee out, and I knew it. And so, that's how that happened. And from there, I went on the shelf, man, for, 6-7 months before I could actually get back in the ring. That was a tough injury because I had been injury free. Other than an elbow and a shoulder surgery with Vince, I had been fairly injury free up until that point.
when you come back from it, you come back as part of KroniK, and man, a lot of people loved that team, big fans, including WWE apparently, who brought you back. But you're doing KroniK when you get back from about 2000 on into what would wind up being the last year of WCW. People ask me all the time with ECW, and it happened at a similar time. It happened 2000 and 2001 was our last year as well. And people always ask me how it felt or if I saw the writing on the wall. In your case, now granted you were very, very young and like you say, green in the business in 89, 90, and you might not have done much in the AWA, but in your case, you got to see the dwindling days of the AWA, and I didn't really get to ask you if you felt that there was any hope or optimism there when you were there, or if people kind of saw the writing on the wall there. But you got to see that, and then you got to see 1992 Herb Abrams UWF in South Carolina, and then now here we're going into January 2001 and whatnot with WCW. The last year of WCW, how did it compare? Do you see any comparison at all with your time in the AWA? Is there any way to make a connection? And then beyond that, just kind of a more general, broad question, the end of WCW, did you and did a lot of the talent see it coming, so to speak, and could you see the writing on the wall?
But like comparing WCW's end to AWA's end and Herb Abrams' end, they were drawing, I mean, no one basically, very, very small crowds. And yeah, you could tell and knew that they were going under, even me as a green guy back then. With WCW, you could tell that things were towards the end. You could tell me and Bryan had been on such a tear, man. I mean, we were just steamrolling people left and right with the KroniK gimmick. I mean, it was over big time with the double choke slam, the high times finisher. And so, we just really, not to toot my horn here, but we got over and we stayed over and up until the end. But we could see that the houses were a little bit down, and they were going down slowly. And but nothing like, of course, like when you look back, compare that to AWA, no. I mean, it was different. But we knew that they were trying to, I guess that this was along the time of the AOL Time Warner merger. So that was a big reason, I think, that they were trying to sell the company. And there were a couple of buyers that were going to supposedly purchase the company, and it just didn't happen. And then that's where Vince basically just got it for nothing, from what I understand. And so yeah, that's how that happened, from everything I remember.
Were you surprised that there was the interest, or were you expecting it kind of being on the short list and kind of being wanted as WCW assets acquired, and here you wind up, in September of 2001, you're on SmackDown, I think, and you and Bryan are like choke slamming the Undertaker. I mean, it's kind of like it's amazing that I guess KroniK was so over that I guess there was no harm done, and I guess they didn't really hold it against you from not taking that flight to Boston and going home instead and going with WCW. But I mean, can you talk about that, like just kind of the very end of WCW, how you finished up there, how it closed up shop, and then can you talk about maybe the 6 months that make up the middle of 2001 that lead into you and Bryan showing up on SmackDown?
Yes, the end of it, we actually, Bryan and I both were injured. And I say injured, that's when I was telling you about the 30 staples in my head with the concussion. So I was out for that show where they announced the buyout. And Bryan had an emergency appendectomy, so he was out too. It was just one of those things, that weird timing. But yeah, they purchased the company. And then so we still had, like 6, 8 months or whatever on our contracts. And so, of course, we're not going to go and throw away our contract because we had a really good deal and go and work. And we talked, I mentioned that I'd left, just said, hey, I'm going home. Well, Bryan pretty much did the same thing. And there was always that undertone of even when we got there and we choke slammed Taker through a table, we put Kane through a table. Our first few things that we did, we were there for just like a cup of coffee, basically. And I'll get to that. But, we had been off for over a year at least before we went up there. And really, I mean, we were working out and training and stuff, but any wrestler will tell you that working out in gym shape is not the same as ring shape. And there were some places in Atlanta where I would go and get in the ring some, but nothing like what you need. You need to go on the road and knock that rust off kind of thing. And they brought us up there and sort of hot-shotted an angle within a couple of weeks. And it was just not a good time. People ask about, they always, especially the people that do not know the full history of KroniK, how over we were in WCW versus just that, a couple of squash matches on TV at one TV taping, I think, and then thrown right into a pay-per-view. If you look back, you'll see that pay-per-view. You'll see Kane has a big wrap around one of his arms, so he's got a staph infection. Taker has a shoulder injury. I think Bryan had some back issues, and I had some neck issues. But nothing that couldn't be worked out over a couple of weeks on the road, working a little bit of getting your feet back under you. It's a larger ring. There's just little different things. But and I suggested this. I think, hey, why don't we go on the road for a couple of weeks? But, oh, no, they want to hot shot it. And they did. And, of course, we did not have a good match. And we actually ended up leaving after that. But we actually signed a whole 1-year contract, so I got paid another year without even working. I didn't want it to end up like that. But prior to even signing with Vince, I told Bryan, I said, we need to go to Japan. That's where we need to go. And he was friends with Taker. And so I guess maybe Mark could talk him into, hey, come on up and let's do this and stuff. But I knew that Vince had still had that underlying heat of Bryan leaving and also with me leaving. And I just felt it, it was weird, but I just had that feeling. And I'll just throw this in there to the story too. Super nice guy, great guy, Stevie Richards. They put him as our manager. And Bryan looked at me and he goes, that's not a good sign. I was just like, I told you we should have went to Japan. And nothing against Stevie Richards because he's excellent in so many parts of his life. He's a good guy. But it didn't fit with our gimmick is what my point being. And so, yeah, that's sort of what happened, man. And eventually, of course, after we finished up with Vince, we would go on to All Japan, which is where I said we wanted to be, and it ended up being the pinnacle of our career because we won the All Japan titles, and one of my top 3 all-time guys that I looked up to presented me with the belts, and that was Stan the Man Hansen. So to me, at a sold-out arena in Osaka, Japan, we won the titles, and the streamers coming down, and Stan handing us the belts. I don't know how that's the top of the mountain for me personally and as a tag team. And with Bryan, who was my best partner I've ever had, bar none.
That's interesting. It makes sense when you think about it. It is interesting. Come to think about it. So then what I don't want to do is kind of gloss over it. I want to spend a little time, if you don't mind, because you're there 8 months straight, I think, just about. And then actually all told you're there for a little bit over a year in Japan. What was it like for you, man? I know you just talked about winning the titles and getting presented by Stan Hansen and the streamers and the Full House and just all that, but in addition to it being the pinnacle of your career, as you said, just in detail, what was the life like? What was the road in Japan for you like? Did you get to the point where you were learning any Japanese since you were there for about a year or so? Just tell us a little bit everything, the schedule, the pay, the food. How was it over there?
Well, the pay was excellent. Bryan had worked out a deal because, I'll tell you, like I said, Bryan's a military veteran, and so am I, and Bryan was stationed in Japan. So he actually went to a dojo over there when he was in the military. I think the same one at the same time, around the time Benoit was over there. And so Bryan had actually had married a girl that was half Japanese, and so he spoke some Japanese. I did not. I ended up, with my military career, I was in Belgium, Europe. So, but yeah, Bryan was a big leader in that, as far as being us to be able to communicate and get around and food and those kind of things. And we were tight, man. We were like brothers. I'm telling you, 6'6", 290 plus, both named Bryan, both military vets. We just had so much in common, man. And he was the funniest guy on the planet. So it was, I mean, I tell people this story. I would have to tell Bryan to stop talking or let me out of the car because he was that funny. I mean, I'm crying. I can't catch my breath. Just some of the things of him being his partner and being on the road with him. Loved him to death. But yeah, he was really helpful as far as being over there negotiating our deal. We would go for a few weeks at a time and come home. You know, I don't know. I can't remember how long we would come home for, a couple of weeks or so, depending on the shows and what they had coming up. And then we would go back and forth. You know, I loved it. I really did. I've always been a snug. I wouldn't say I could be stiff if I wanted to be. If I had to be, it was not a problem. But it was always snug. I mean, I got to work with some great people over there, and so I loved it. And I think Bryan did too. We both really felt like, man, this is where we should be. And so it was a great experience. And I'd been to Japan before with WWF when they did an initial show back. I think it was '94 or something. But this time was just, you know, so much more later in my career. I knew so much more. And so, yeah, it was a good experience.
After Japan, you retired, right? In 2003?
That sounds about right, yeah.
What have you been doing since then? And we're going to, you know, we talked earlier in the kind of, in the virtual green room. We talked a little bit in the pre-interview, and we're going to, because this is such an unbelievable deep dive that you've helped us put together, and really a thorough look at your life, both personally and professionally. You know, not to dismiss it entirely, and that's why I'm bringing it up kind of on a cursory level right now. But we're going to not delve into any of the legal aspect. We're not going to talk about the pending the class action traumatic brain injury suit. We're not going to talk about your 2020 the case that was brought against you that's since been dismissed by the other side. So all of that, you know, it's of interest, and if people want to, you know, look that up and look it up when they're looking you up, like you said, you know, you've done some shoot interviews, which is not what this is, and you've discussed that stuff there. So this is kind of not all about that. So we're not going to talk about that. But from 2003 on, what have you been doing after your wrestling retirement, and what's life like now and going forward, Bryan?
You know, I'll tell you, after about a year, maybe a year or two, I really didn't do anything. I stayed around Atlanta for about a year, maybe. And then I moved out to Phoenix, Arizona, which is where I'm at now, and I've been here ever since. I realized I didn't do a whole lot. I got real bored, honestly, and I got into the casino business and worked in the casino business for about 10 years. It was fun. It was kept me busy. You know, I needed to stay busy. I still work out. I still train. That'll never leave me. That's been with me since a teenager, and I've never stopped. Even to this morning at 5 a.m. I'm going at it, you know, even though I'm older and stuff. I just train differently. But yeah, so I did that, and after that, I retired from there and said, okay. So I took some more time off. I did a little bit of acting. I did Axeman 2, which is I call it my B- horror movie. And I did a Champ Sporting Good commercial with Larry Fitzgerald. I've just done a few different things, you know, keeping me busy here. But recently, man, a big retro surge in pro wrestling, retro stuff. It's in my era. And speaking of tomorrow, I have my new action figure coming out from Cella Toys. And if you look at Real Bryan Clark on Twitter, All the information is there. And then also on my Facebook page, there's a ton of stuff under Bryan Clark. It's Bryan Clark. And then also more merchandise is on eBay at AdamBomb-KroniK, KroniK. So I've got just so much stuff going on. Like today, when I put out the pre-sale stuff, I mean, just before I talked to you, I was just nonstop answering questions about it and everything. But tomorrow morning they go on sale or pre-sale, and we are actually going to do a whole series. We're not just doing just this one Adam Bomb. We're going to do a KroniK team. We're going to do Wrath, probably versions 1 and 2. So it's a big line. They've been an excellent company to work with. They're in the UK. Also, I'll just keep while I'm still talking about merchandise and stuff, because that's such a big thing I'm doing right now, and it's fun, and I enjoy it. If you look on any of my merchandise sites, like the ones I mentioned, every design you see is what I designed. I put the colors together, the fonts, all my designs. I had a graphic person work with me, but I designed every one of them. I have about 19 shirts on ProWrestlingTees.com, another excellent company that I'm working with. If you want to see, just put up Adam Bomb and you can check out all the shirts that I've designed. I had a major input on every single photo, or every single shirt design. I also reconnected with Tom Fleming, who's with Marvel Comics. We have a new Adam Bomb 2021. It's called Nuclear Warning, and it's in the Marvel comic type format of a photo. It's on T-shirts, posters, the works. So, man, I've been really busy with all of this stuff, and now I've got appearances coming up, which is great. The world is reopening, I think. I'm not completely sure. But I will be at SummerSlam in the next couple of weeks, and then after that, I'll be back in Vegas for the annual Cauliflower Alley Convention, which is my first one ever, so that's pretty cool. I'm excited about that. And then October, I have Hartford, Connecticut, Albany, New York. They got a lot of shows coming up, all appearances and signings, not actual ring work, of course. But it's great, man, because I'll go ahead and say it's just my opinion, and I think that pro wrestling fans are the best fans ever. I mean, if you look at all the other sports and stuff, but man, pro wrestling fans are so loyal, and they stick by you through thick and thin. And they've been great with me. And so that's just sort of where I'm at right now.
So Cella, I've been talking with them on and off a little bit loosely through email. I'm looking to put my first action figures out there ever, and I've been talking with them as well. Heard great things from other people as well that do work with them. So maybe I'll get around to it and pull the trigger and go with them as well. But we're going to piggyback anything that you put up on social media. We're going to make sure to get the word out there to our people as well, and make sure that everybody gets the jump and gets those figures as soon as they're available. I may be seeing you twice in Vegas in the next few weeks, because I've also been talking with the same promoters for the NERD, for the Nerd, for that same signing that you're a part of the SummerSlam weekend. And also I'm looking to go to Cauliflower Alley. Bought it before pandemic. This is scheduled to be my second time out there. So hopefully all goes well. Vegas stays open. Negotiations go the way that they're expected to. And hopefully I'll be seeing you at both of those, the August and the September in Vegas. Hey, dude, I'm a big mark for casinos. What did you do in the casino industry exactly?
I actually was a surveillance supervisor. So I was watching what you were doing.
You were the eye in the sky, huh?
I was the eye in the sky, man. It was very interesting because, I was in the military, like I said, and I worked as a military police officer in that capacity. So, I had already had some of that type training. And so, it was pretty easy to adapt to it. And like I said, at times it was fun, at times it was boring, just like anything.
I love it. From the Air Force and being an MP there to being Adam Bomb to being the eye in the sky at the casino. What a life, man. What a life. Some people would love to do any of those three. You did them all.
And college football, brother.
And walking on college football, man.
Yeah.
God,
and
hard stuff, dude.
Dude, I didn't even play high school, and I didn't even play high school football.
It's amazing, dude. It's amazing.
Yeah, I was on the Air Force powerlifting team. I won the U.S. Air Force in Europe powerlifting championship. I just feel like I have done so much, man. You know, there's been a couple bumps in the road. Nothing that didn't matter to doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? So it's been good, man. Like I said, and support. I got some great people that I'm surrounded by, and I really appreciate that.
I'm glad it all worked out for you, man, at the end. And even if paying your dues and cutting your teeth, even if when you were still kind of young and all in '94, even if it felt like you were getting underpaid, man, like I told you, I mean, you were on my radar as Night Stalker, and I could see the money in you, and I knew that it just wasn't your size, but it was just kind of your charisma, and I knew that it was your presence. And, bro, you know, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, man, their 95 Top 500, which is based on 1994 work, they had you, I think, at number 47. They had you as one of the top 50 wrestlers on the planet. So it's inarguable that you are likely getting significantly underpaid, but it's good to see that through the years you stuck with it, and beyond wrestling you've stuck with success. And it's just good to see you on the other side and just enjoying and thriving in retirement. And, man, I hope these action figures with the trademarks that you're holding and all the designs, I hope they do real, real well for you. And hopefully if I don't see you twice in Vegas between now and the end of the summer, hopefully I see you at least once. But,
yeah, man, that'd be great.
Great to have you on the show, dude.
All right, brother. Hey, look forward to meeting you. We hang out for a while.
Likewise. Thank you so much,
okay,
ladies and gentlemen. Bryan Clark, and we'll have more 69-minute Eargasm after this. And well, on location, a special edition of the History segment. Today in history, on our 69-minute Eargasm, we are honored to have with us on location from inside his automobile in Albany, New York, for the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame inaugural banquet. And if there is anyone who you would expect to find at the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame inaugural banquet, it would be the inimitable, the one, the only, Mr. John Pantosi.
Well, thank you, Joel. So let's get right to it. Today in history, we'll start off in 1958. Ricky Dozan defeats Lou Thez to win the International title. Lou had given up his NWA championship for a lucrative Japanese tour, and the international title was created, and of course Ricky Dozan captured that title from Lou. Okay, 1965, Atlanta, Georgia. Nick Kozak and Dick Steinborn defeat Billy Hines and Bad Boy Hines to win the Southern Tag Team titles. 1971, in Los Angeles, California, Black Swordman and Goliath beat Mr. or Masa Saito and Kinji Shibuya to capture the Americas Tag Team titles. 1976, Chicago, Illinois, AWA champ Nick Bockwinkel goes to a no contest with Andre the Giant. And if you are a fan of Andre in wrestling, you will note that every time Andre had to challenge any of the various champions, there was never a clear-cut finish to the matches. Okay, 1978, Mexico City, Mexico. KroniK beats Lou Thez to become the UWA heavyweight champion. So Lou was making money. There's a 20-year gap there where Lou dropped two different titles there. Okay, 1979, Memphis, Tennessee. Bill Dundee beats Ron Bass to win the Southern title. Now we jump to 1990, SummerSlam in Philadelphia. Kerry Von Erich pins Intercontinental Champion Mr. Perfect to win the title. On the same show, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart defeated the WWF Tag Team Champs Demolition, at the time Crush and Smash, to win those titles. 1994, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Cactus Jack and Mikey Whipwreck, subbing for Terry Funk, defeat the Public Enemy and win the ECW World Tag Team Championship. On that show, there was an NWA World Championship tournament. The final match, Shane Douglas defeats Too Cold Scorpio to win the NWA World Heavyweight title. However, Shane decided to throw it down and proclaimed himself the very first ECW World Heavyweight Champion. Okay, in 1995, the next year, SummerSlam in Pittsburgh, Bertha Faye with Harvey Whippleman pins WWF champ Alundra Blaze to win the title. And finally, we wish Sergeant Slaughter a happy 73rd birthday today, and that is this day in history.
Thank you so much, John. And wouldn't you know it, well, 45 years ago today, great that we got an Andre result. I always love that. 45 years ago today was the Andre result with Nick Bockwinkel in Chicago. And then 31 years ago today, in 1990 at SummerSlam, you mentioned Demolition Crush, who was Brian Adams, who was, of course, the tag team partner as well of Bryan Clark, who you just heard from as we interviewed him in this episode of The Eargasm. Thank you. Unbelievable yeoman's work, my friend. Always a pleasure. Enjoy the Hall of Fame festivities this weekend. I can't wait to talk more about that when next we have you with us.
Thank you, Joel, and we'll see you at the matches.
You're so welcome, and we'll have more 69-Minute Eargasm after this.